Okay, guys, so thanks for being here. I called this urgent meeting because I just got a call from one of our local agents back in India, and we need to get this figured out for the education. This is a very urgent priority on the agenda, and I just would like to hear your opinions on the matter, as you guys have been working with me on this project. So let me just, catch you guys up on the matter. So I got for the phone call last night. Since the partition of India due to religious matters in the village specifically, there has been religious conflict going on that we all have been aware of. Maybe one of us is more aware of than the other one, but we'll talk about that later. So what it is like, as there are two different religious groups mainly, and they would like teachers of their religion of their own. So to put in other words, one religion of the educators who are from their religion, and the other one's the same but just from their religion as well. The problem is, as you know, an international organization who is working with the Indian government, what are some ways that we have to consider? What are the factors that we have to consider? Knowing that they want Western education with educators from their own religion, is that a possible factor that we can consider into? What are some strategies that we can think about? What do you guys think, John?
So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and just to make sure we're clear, an Indian village is having conflict right now because it has two main religious sects to it.
Correct.
Each of those wants teachers to educate their children of the same religious background.
Exactly, and
Okay.
mainly Western religion, Western education, which means like in English. All the curriculums in education
They're looking
is
for
in
an English Western
exactly,
education.
yes,
Okay.
correct.
And they've reached out to the government. They've gone through the government to reach out to us to help find these educators.
Exactly, and this is one of the reasons why I think it's one of the priorities on our agenda, is we have to figure this out in order to pursue with our project at all. We have been working on this for years now, and then this cannot be something that stop us in the middle of the project. So I would like to get this sorted out as soon as possible. So who would like to?
What are your thoughts on it?
So what I think how we should handle the situation is that I think we should kind of like just meet what these groups are asking for, kind of based on, it's kind of with us being a foreign nation and also helping out with a certain situation and us acting as contractors. I feel like it's our responsibility to meet what they are asking for and let them decide how to best move forward. So we'll find the educators for the Western education that these groups are looking for, who match up with their predetermined requirements, and I believe that should, like, we'll check up on them from time to time, but I think for the main thing, we should find these educators and try and hit the objectives that these groups want in particular.
Okay, so when you say objectives, are you saying that, the objectives that they're asking is, the educators who are within the same religion? Are you
Yes.
are you saying that we should go for that, and then, we should value their objectives and opinions when it comes to the religion matters?
I think we should hold what they're looking for in educators to the highest degree, like highest priority.
Even if it may be that is harmful to the communities because it is an infringement on, what we may want to do, but ultimately what the community needs?
Well, it kind of comes down to our responsibility as an organization as well. Are we meant to kind of create and try and fix the problems of other individuals, or should we try and meet the requirements that they're asking for?
But is it our requirement then to provide them the educators that they asked for because of their religious background?
I would say yes, because we as a foreign nation, how would that look on the international field if we were trying to solve an issue that these groups don't necessarily want to deal with at this time? They have larger priorities of education in this situation to deal with.
So, irrespective of the optics, which it seems that you're trying to get at, it seems that what needs to change within this community, or what the government is asking us to change, are the economic conditions that create the poverty that they are currently privy to as a community, as two separate communities right now, it seems. If that is what we intend to change, and right now we seem to think that education is the best way to change it, then we have to provide the most complete form of education in order to change that. And what seems to be needing change, or the main paradigm of change to me, is that there's a root separation, or there's a root conflict of religion, and that conflict is preventing this community from moving forward. And so I think that as an entity that is trying to provide education for this community, we should be able to put ourselves in a position where we are intending to directly change that.
Okay, so I see both of your guys' side. Omar, what you're saying is that, are you still trying to focus on the education? What is your focus in your main argument, just to clarify?
I guess my focus is education, but ultimately it's to go beyond our assumption or definition of what education is. And it is to address the broader challenge of a divided society. Because I think that's the main issue. And in addressing that broader challenge, we can provide the needed education and do the task at hand, which is to provide these people with an opportunity to move forward in society and to gain educations and move beyond poverty in that economic sense.
I get where you're coming from, but one of the issues that I have is that who's to say that this is one cohesive society? They're already conflicting with each other based on different religious ideologies. So who's to say that this is one community when this could be two conflicting communities with each other? So looking at it, there's all these different aspects that we have to look out for, because even if we are able to get these groups together to talk, there's still a sense of territoriality, and there might be this nonverbal communication outside of the meetings that we are present at. So if we get these communities together to have discussions about educators and trying to unite these communities, one aspect could be, or one possibility could be, they have these conversations, they say, yes, okay, we'll do this, but in the end, they go outside of that and choose not to interact or try and work to provide these solutions, when their original goal was just to get educators of their similar religious backgrounds.
Well, to answer your first question, which is who are we, or what is to say that this community will be receptive to this, or what is to say that this community will even want something like a unity to exist between them, I would point to the circularity of the Indian culture generally. I think that as a national entity, we have certain values, and those values are a plurality when they can occur. And in fact, the formation of India during this time where this conflict occurred was precisely due to this type of conflict occurring, which is that of religious divides, which is something that our founders did not want. And it is something that I think that most communities within our nation agree is an important thing, that we do not have religious conflict become the definition of a community, and that we live in a society that is collective and pluralistic in its religious discourse, if that makes sense. So I'm saying that, yes, within our modern times, there has been a division within the society. But if you point at the circularity of our civilization, it seems that our communities always return to a sense of plurality and a sense of collectivism that is formed on more than just religion. And so based on that religious or historical precedence, historical precedence, it seems that the natural or peaceful return would be a society that is more communicative in its religion and willing to live and perhaps even go beyond coexistence in that sense.
But I understand you guys' main focus are both education. It's just different ways to approach it. But at the same time, we cannot forget there is actually a division in the village, depending on the religious matters. There is actually a division where people will not willing to, even get along in the same village even though they're living in the same village. We have to take consideration about that. And I have a question about your strategy. Is there a reason why, a fundamental reason why you would like to, focus on the unity of the village rather than just taking care of the education to begin with?
Because I think that to me it seems that this division is a fundamental issue that has led to the symptom of poverty, and the division of, because historically again, the different divides amongst the community had different vocations, and those vocations provided then for a market or an economy. And when the division occurred, the economy suffered. And so if there is economic poverty within the region, part of that problem could be the religious conflict. And unity, that is a peace formed between these communities, can lead to economic prosperity and also can provide us with a strong foundation for providing education to everyone. And through that education, we can ultimately fulfill our project. Now it may take a little longer, but it may be more successful as a result.
The difficulty I have with that is that there's all these pre-existing divisions in between different groups talking about invisible barriers, about different ideological ideas, cultural, and like talking about these divisions, it's not going to be, like you said, it's going to take a much longer game to get there. But is it our responsibility to play the long game or just meet the requirements that these groups are asking for? Because we can go in and try and like create new change and so on and so forth to create peace, to get teachers. But another argument to that is we need teachers to get peace. And if these individual communities aren't going to respect that the teachers are from different groups, the likelihood of them actually educating their children is very, very low.
Okay, so I see both of you guys' point. You would like to focus on what seems to be urgent matter rather than going back to the root cause of the conflict itself, and you would like to go back to the root cause and then change as it is, and then so I see both of your point, and I see both pros and cons from those strategies. I think this is something that we have to talk as a larger group rather than coming up with result or a decision right now at this point. So I would like to maybe have you guys submit like a report and then like talk about it in a larger meeting environment. Was there anything else that?
I mean, I think that one thing that I forgot to touch on, and I think it's important to look at this. I know that we're trying to come to a conclusion at the end of the day, but I do fundamentally disagree with my opponent. And so one of the things that I disagree on is I think that we are regretting to recognize that within Indian culture, the value of education is different, and that because the definition of education may differ between our NGO Western donor audience and this community, we may be able to use education more of a peacemaking capacity because teachers are seen as individuals that are more charismatic than perhaps, and their role in society is far more important than perhaps in other cultures. But I mean, I think that this is something that we could explore further within our reports.
That's definitely
which
something
I'm
that
obviously very excited to write.
That's definitely something that we will take into consideration. So thanks for being here today, and I appreciate you guys sharing your thoughts on this.
All right. That's it.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about our prompt, which was the nature of belonging. And we'll talk, and then we'll move on to talk about different concepts that we have used for this course materials. First, I'll talk about. Well, actually, you guys go ahead and you guys want to talk about the nature of belonging first.
So, kind of, what we wanted to do was kind of talk about not necessarily parties that like we didn't want it to be kind of a first-person context. We kind of wanted to have like an out-of-the-box experience, talking about second and third parties and how to deal with individuals who are having problems with a sense of belonging. So what we wanted to do is kind of, since Omar and I are constantly arguing about good stuff in the car on the way, we thought like, okay, maybe we can kind of use this as a method to talk about difficult issues concerning different religious communities having problems with educators in their community. So we wanted to kind of like expand upon that and talk about not just like the sense of belonging, but also the senses of division in between individuals and how to possibly overcome those.
Yeah. And when it comes to the question then about the nature of belonging, what we wanted to touch on is that sometimes there's a fundamental disagreement on what belonging is or where belonging is. And we wanted the debate to kind of be framed around a disagreement about what does it mean for a community to belong, and what is the natural order of things in that sense.
Yeah, so they obviously had different stances when it comes to belonging. John was more, leaving the status of belonging as they are right now, even though there is a petition of religious matters, because that's how it has been going on for decades, and how so to maintain the village as the people are belonging as they are is what John's coming from, where John's coming from, and Omar is bringing the communities together and then have them belong to the bigger unity of the village, or where they were both coming from. So to go over the concepts, I'll first talk about the reading concepts, which we chose success framing and change. It was Church and Rogers. So in the article, they talk about, the authors talk about definition of success. In this case, the definition of success was obviously different coming from both strategies. So we talked about how success could be different. Here, John was arguing that we need to, as this is a priority of our agenda, we need to focus on what is urgent and urgent matter, and we need to value the community's objectives. At the same time, Omar wanted to go deeper and then talk about what is actually needed in the community. So they define success, the term success, in different ways. Another thing that was talked in the article was theories of changes. So I came up with a couple of different theories of change that they used in the debate. Omar's was the root cause justice theory, as self-explaining. He wanted to go deeply more about the poverty in India, the possible root cause of poverty and the education, what is actually needed, what is the justice they actually need. John's was the institutional development theory and the political elite theory. As we were the international organization who were working with the Indian government, it was kind of our priority to go along with what the political elite might say, what they're willing to change along our side, and in order to bring educators who are from the same religious background, we need institutional development theory, institution development, of course, to develop Western education in the village in India. Another reading concept that we use is dehumanization dynamics. There are two different aspects of dehumanization dynamics we found out. One was obvious, between two segregated groups in the village. Due to the religious conflict, it would be really very possible that they would have, dehumanization dynamics towards the other group. At the same time, we thought it was interesting to see from the perspective of the Indian government and elite. They thought that they usually think that they're the people who are in the authorities who are better than those who are on the ground, so they're in charge of implementing changes, which hence the upper people decide everything and the people on the ground are forced to accept the change. And within that ideology and perspective, we thought that dehumanization dynamics existed as well. So going on to the book readings, what do you guys have?
So, do you want to do that?
I think you go first and then I'll go.
So a lot of what my argument was based on mostly a short-term solution to a larger issue that's going on. So I wanted to kind of focus on two of the main negative aspects that could be around this issue. So in particular, talking about the issue of territoriality, how individuals kind of focus themselves into like a distinct group and the separation in between individuals, and how that can affect the interactions with other communities. And kind of moving on from that, also building with it the idea of kind of this invisible barrier in between individuals and also separate communities that will stop them from actually interacting with others and expanding upon and creating connections in between other individuals. My kind of argument itself was based more on issue of get the teachers into a situation that they can promote peace rather than have peace to get teachers in there, which was much more of Omar's argument. So,
yeah.
And we got most of these ideas were very present in Berna Turum's book. I'm pulling it up right now. Gaining Freedoms, Claiming Space in Istanbul and Berlin.
And so we talked a lot about that, but we also brought from Letterak's book, the Letterak's, plural book. And so there's two kind of concepts that we used because it was a debate. It wasn't the goal was not to explore the actual topic, it was to use it for the purpose of argument. So there were some things that were omitted within how I argued them. So circularity, for example, was one of the arguments that I used. And within, I think, Letterak's book, they talk a lot about the repetitive cycles of how to heal, that it has to be a gradual process, that it's not linear, and it requires a sense of nurturing and all of that. And so within our argument, we talk a little bit about the return or the natural state of a society and the circularity that may be present within that, or the cycles of how a society changes and how it returns to its normal state, if there is such a thing. And so that was the first kind of discussion about circularity. The second topic or theme that we looked at within Letter X's book is metaphors, and how different groups may understand different terms and different different metaphors. So the example that they used was one about peace and what that means to different communities, what it means to the international development community as opposed to a locally constructed definition. And so those are the two definitions that we used from Letter X's work, and we both touched on them at some point.
I am
the child soldier who
belonged.
Belonged to a family whose love made me feel safe and protected.
I am the mother who loved, who gave them their names and watched them grow. I loved them as they learned to walk and then to dance. Even as they marched away at the call of the Pied Piper, I loved them still.
I am the father of a child soldier, the chief in my village, a man of respect and honor. I am diplomatic in my approach, yet violent in my actions.
For who is a mother whose child is taken from her reach? And who is a child who forgets the eternal bond with its mother? How can either remain standing as the tsunami of violence tears down the whole world and blurs the line between loss and lost?
The unique coercion of
Village violence
persuaded me to fight, a fight for a new civil society where my childhood innocence would forever reside.
But violence is not violence compared to what the devil is capable of, what they were capable of. They hold all the power, regardless of my title, my diplomacy. No such thing as a safe zone. They took him from our home. What good is a fence if easily breached?
In my transition, doubt, conflict, and power intercepted my intuition, opposition. No longer belonged, but
Fighting to belong.
When I no longer knew who I was or where to replant my roots, I knew I loved them.
My wife blames me for allowing them to take him.
Allowing.
Did I allow? Would she rather they take and rape her or our precious daughter? I made a decision not to act, protecting the weak instead.
mobility through the uncharted territories as a child soldier opened my eyes. Quick! Intersecting peace with war, war with peace, the rush through violent affairs, I was born, a child soldier.
Now I am to blame.
To blame.
I take the burden of blame.
I loved them as they were forced to kill. I wonder if they thought of me and paused before pulling the trigger.
I wonder how many he has killed. Has he raped? What has he done to survive?
I am the child soldier who killed those emulated for the sake of emulating. I am the child soldier who is killing for camaraderie, my new social capital. I am the child soldier who will kill to belong.
I do not belong in my own family. My father and his father and his father before paved this land.
This land I no longer belong on. And one day the waters stilled, and they came back. I could feel it in my bones before I saw them standing there at the tree, torn between two lines and two worlds, balanced on the razor's edge of childhood.
Belong with those once emulated, searching to belong again. I miss my family. I miss the love I once felt and the home I once knew. To be close to my mother and father again would fulfill my need to belong.
He is back, but he is no longer the same.
The same. We will never be the same.
Our family, our community, our country is broken. Broken glass is still broken with all its pieces. What will hold us
together? Together.
They say I should be happy. Happy he is safe. My wife is happy. She has her son. I see my son, but I don't feel love.
And I built a bridge, taught them to rise from their crawl and walk over it, back to themselves. I held their faces and I cut their hair, and I loved.
I
loved because every mother possesses the blueprints to rebuild a home.
Okay, all right.
So the story, we'll talk about that.
So first we were, the context of the situation is the Sierra Leone Liberia conflict.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to incorporate a child soldier, and we just thought of natural parties within that internal conflict, and so we thought of being the mother and the father who's also the chief. So in personifying our roles, I think I took on diplomacy as a father. Like, people think of fathers as the protector, someone who should have prevented this from happening. But in my role, he was more a bystander, which is what made him feel like he didn't belong within the family.
Yeah, so for mine, because our prompt was the nature of belonging.
Yeah, sorry.
just to clarify. And so for my like personified role, I repeated the word love a lot in particular because it had to do with like the Letter Acts book, When Blood and Bones Cry Out, and the repetition and also being surrounded by love, and that was sort of the mother's role in what they talked about in bringing the child soldiers home. So that was the important piece that reintegrated them.
And for me as a child soldier, of course, I really took great pride in being the child, only because like as a child, I don't know, I thought about the fact that, you know, we grow up and we try to emulate those that we see around us, like our parents, our close friends and family and stuff like that. So I figured naturally as a child, like you would have like this sense of like trying to belong to those that you're close with. So I figured it would just be perfect.
Yeah. So as far as our process, we each individually created a poem given our roles. And then what we did was we came together, which is kind of, I believe, how it would go in real life, like just different people coming together and seeing how their lives mesh or how they conflict. And so we came together and we kind of highlighted words which we thought were important, like violence, love, belonging, not belonging, and just kind of weaved them in together.
Yeah, and that also shows how inseparable each of the storylines are. So at first we were thinking about just doing like one after the other, but we realized like weaving them together would like show that they're all intertwined. So
Yeah.
Talk about the concepts.
yeah.
Yeah, so the different concepts we have, well, I thought social capital is a good one, only because like after killing and stuff for my new social capital, along with the sense of like belonging and stuff, sometimes we do things to gain a sense of like camaraderie or title or whatever, so that fit in with social capital. We have success framing.
Explain.
I think success framing is just like the mother and the father had different perspectives and approaches on how to resolve this conflict and bring their child home, and obviously it was a metaphor for all child soldiers, so I think that was success framing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then power, I think that I tried to personify power in that sometimes you don't always get to be the one in power, even though you have titles, it doesn't really matter. So I tried to personify that.
Next one is safe zones and invisible fences. Well, for belonging and stuff, like I know, like I felt safe whenever I was with my family, but I also felt a sense of safety and security when I was with my soldier friends when I was at war. So that was something that we thought about. Invisible fences is just the different hurdles that I had to go through, and my father had to go through as a diplomat, trying to figure out, well, okay, how can I get my son back, but also end this war and all this different stuff. So.
And even like just having your home like breached like that, there's just no sense of like property or like respect for land.
And the next one's mobility. I thought this fit in perfectly because, again, as a child soldier, like I wasn't always a child soldier. I was once a child, and I had to weave my way through society now being a child soldier, and the different things I would have to go through and overcome, like after killing people and stuff like that, and trying to find my way back to my family to feel belonged again and loved. So, yeah.
Do you want to do the last part? The
What's
letter
the last
rocket
one?
So
So we relied a lot on When Blood and Bones Cry Out, just the circularity of, you know, healing and peace building, how it's a process that needs to be repeated. So that's why we repeated certain words like we mentioned. But yeah, that book just gave us the inspiration for the whole story, which was interesting because we didn't mean to do that on the outset. We were just sort of developing this like narrative, and we were like, oh wait, it would be really fitting if we used this story and tried to get into the minds and the perspectives of the people involved. So
we hope you all enjoy.
yeah.
We will not be silenced. We will not be silenced. We will not be silenced. This is our free space. This is our free space. This is our free space.
If you truly loved your nation, you would comply. We're looking for our freedom. Have you seen it?
We sacrificed our ways for it.
When we last had it, we were neighbors, not brothers in arms.
We're not alone in this struggle.
For prosperity is our noble pursuit.
But to attain it, the road is fraught with peril.
Tolerance is our regime.
Tolerance is our regime. Tolerance is our regime.
Let us never negotiate out of fear, and we will never fear to negotiate.
Our struggles have borne the fruit of prosperity.
That's it. Thank you. Right, so our presentation was pretty short, as you've seen, but I think we really wanted to just grapple with like the abstract symbolization of conflict and feelings of belongingness and security overall. And just with peace and power, So I symbolize the dictator of some sort. Just for some background, we're a made-up country, possibly in the Caribbean. We just gained independence about 60 years ago. And the leader before had really popular plans with self-determination and everything like that. But I'm the successor of that person, and because of my extremist views and my controversy with giving locals, giving the land of the locals to foreigners, I'm not as popular.
Okay. And so yeah, like Sydney said, she represents a dictator. Me and Wada were like the oppressed majority that have been silenced by the dictator. So lack of freedom, information, freedom of expression. It was a lot of censorship. We saw this in the quote: "If you truly loved your nation, you would comply." But by facing nonverbal and physical resistance, we overpowered her. We were inspired by having our group separated into a group versus authority figure, and this was to demonstrate the importance of like social cohesion and building peace and collective mobilization to enact change.
And how we decided to break, like every part of our performance had like a meaning behind it, and the repetition that you see with the stomping and then the repetition within the phrases, that all was taken from Letterock and Letterock's book within the metaphors that he uses and the concepts of healing. And we even like broke down the performance into like 3 parts. The first part, when that was sort of like the struggle and the oppression during the conflict, and then this blanket here, it's kind of this was kind of an idea that we got off of Term's book. It not only represents borders and spaces, it also represents the exchanging of ideas. And there were 3 exact like moments in the book that we were heavily inspired by in Term's book. The part when the author is talking to the captain on a boat, and he explains the metaphor of the bride on the boat, and he says, as our country is deciding whether to join the EU or not, she decides whether she goes to the EU and comes back, and which marriage she wants to be a part of. And that was our idea behind of going outside and coming in, and thinking of it, like discussing the issues within our country, but also reforms and how to turn our country into a place of equality, which is when we decide to pick Sydney up and have her join us as part of the equality and part of the healing. Because at first she was the oppressive leader, but we wanted to heal that pain, the oppression, and kind of have her within our new nation. And it was really a lot of, like the tape was meant to represent silence, and our main, our prompt was demonstrating power within resistance, speech, and silence, which is why we wanted to choose a poetry piece and then started off with the tape, because that was part of the oppression. And we really wanted to focus on, the small details and the elements of, the stomping representing oppression, and our dynamics between me and Cam are meant to like kind of tackle social cohesion and the antecedents of social cohesion in the way that, you know, we had to come together to free ourselves and to go against Sydney, and in the same way that like kind of the problematic parts of like social cohesion is that, you know, the power dynamics and the power struggle of, you know, the politics of belonging within a space and going out and going in and kind of having one line versus the other. We were kind of in competition for a while, and you know, a lot of the scene in the book when they talk about the piece of art and how it freaked both the secular and the non-secular groups, because it was kind of like a melding of ideas. And as well, like the image in the book when they talk about the jewelry store that was in the more secular area but was so popular among the Muslim women, and that kind of imagery of, you know, things bringing people together, ideas bringing people together, and how that affects the, you know, the images of like belonging. And
with our last point of reflection, which was the transformation piece that we wanted to reflect, we turned our backs to you guys just to symbolize that while the conflict hasn't fully passed, we're still looking forward to like what we can do in the future as a society. That's why our backs were turned to you guys. And when we include the line "tolerance is our regime," it just was kind of to discuss like the aspects of voluntarism throughout society. We feel that a lot of times the nature of like being tolerant without undoing very core and substance issues within a society. So while we were together and cohesive and like we're standing and marching and repeating the same things and we're wearing white, which is supposed to symbolize peace, there may still be deeper issues in the future with social stratification and everything like that. So just to kind of like, it's kind of hypocritical that it's like, well, we're tolerant, but it's like still regime, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and as well, like this, like the idea of going from the black to white was kind of a metaphor that we, or like inspiration from Lederach's book, when he talks about like transformations and colors and, you know, the importance of the healing within the conflict process. And we wanted to symbolize that within the process. So when we were talking about, like, the poem was supposed to represent reform and equality and issues within a conflict and change it and like transformation within the conflict. And then at the end when we said the quotes, that was supposed to represent post-conflict transformation, which is like transformation, prosperity, peace. So we had like the struggle at first, the transformation in the middle, and then the kind of post-conflict healing and rebuilding afterwards. And us taking off the jackets was symbolizing the beginning of that transformational period within the conflict.
And we still wanted to symbolize just tolerance in general, not just like, oh, we're peaceful now, you know, because peace doesn't just emit like throughout that really short session you've seen. And tolerance as a way can really be used as a weapon to like put people into submission, you know, and really just make them complacent with where they are. So while they may believe that they're on the same level as me, I may still harbor feelings that they aren't. You know, I could just be tolerant and complacent and then have another really unpopular thing going on.